now. Ask Dr. Phil about this Anunnaki thing. Very hot topic. A lot of people are talking about the Anunnaki, the Nephilim. I know you've touched on this in the past, but
Yeah.
talk. What's the deal with the Anunnaki from Dr. Phil Valentine's? you know, please.
Those who from the high places came. In other words, they supposedly are the ones who were responsible for genetically engineering us into existence. Those who from the high plains or the high worlds or the high mountains, they're still speaking essentially about a set of people or a group of people that essentially came from the mountains of the moon, because that's where the beginning of ancient Kemetic uh, energies came from. They say these people came in from saucers and ships. Yeah, they probably did, because their ancestors went forward and found the bridge, the light bridge that they call in Asgard, the Rainbow Bridge. They found a portal to go from one enconed or one endomed reality to another. And after the Great Destruction, which essentially was the tearing of the suture that you see up there that they call the Milky Way, which is what the ancient Mayans call Sibalba. That Milky Way that you see, that streak across there that they call it Nu, that was where the great waters came in and flooded out the old order. That's why they're finding today, they're excavating the land and the ocean to find great civilizations buried there. And the one that's supposed to have been the one to clear up in the Japanese language, because again, it's all Anunnaki, in the Japanese culture, they said that the one who healed the sky was not anyone who of the Anunnaki, that it was a goddess called Nuwa. Now, in the Japanese culture, it's Nuwa, but in the Kemetic pantheon, it's Nu or Nw, Nu. So when you see the body with the stars, that's representative of the goddess that supposedly was the one who stitched or created what we see as the keloid. I call it the keloid in the sky. You call it the Milky Way. But the Anunnaki are supposedly ones who came, and a lot of them had different bodies that they wore. They were from a supposedly a denser water environment. And the Persians and the Sumerians showed them with fish tails. These are where the mermaids came from. And they do have life forms under the ocean right now in the trenches that have life forms that we are yet to see. We haven't seen near some of the life forms that have been out there. But don't go for what they tell you the Anunnaki is about, because everything is dealing from spirituality. I can get deeper into it, but I have to give you a history that will, it'll take too much time from other people. But if you wanted to get into the Anunnaki, you can read about it, take in all of the stories, but do not take them as literal stories. Understand that when you deal with the myth is actually the spirit telling the story. When you're reading a myth, it's not the intellect that's telling the story. The intellect is being used as a filter that the spirit is actually speaking to tell stories. That's why it sounds so wild. It sounds so crazy, because the spirit is not encased in time and does not have the fixtures of time, which makes us more perceptually focused into the concreteness of matter. Whereas when you're dealing in the higher forms of thought, the one that actually precedes that energy. You're dealing from the spirit speaking about its own experience. So when you're looking at myth, you see all these fantastic people doing all these fantastic things. It's usually an inspired person tapping into what the spirit, going into meditative spaces, using the ayahuasca, using the peyote, using these different types of what they call them. Uh, well, you know what I'm talking about when I talk about the materials that the shamans used.
Yeah.
They're going into these places and they're meeting up with these so-called gods, but they're actually tapping into the akasha. They're tapping into the memory of those entities that lived before us. Some of them, remember, that memory is not about them taking on a body or a form. They were still in their ethereal forms. Because remember, this is the sixth root race we're going into from the first root race that fell.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're going back into the seventh root race, which is the one that creates the doorway back into a whole other reality, or the reality that we just keep tapping into, and people keep feeding us stories. And those of us who take those, because who's interpreting the Anunnaki for us? We keep reading what white people are talking about.
Zachariah Stitchin and all of that.
Zachariah Sitchin is telling you this is what is meant, and who is he?
Well, Dr. York, what do you think about what Dr. York had to say about the Anunnaki?
Well, I think that Dr. York pretty much put the black back into it, but I'm not sure essentially as far as the metaphysics of it. Again, he put a concreteness to that, which I really admire. But to me, the Anunnaki are us, and that it's a memory of what we were. And we're looking back at our own ancestry, and we're looking back and saying, well, these must have been some great ass, these motherfuckers were so goddamn, they're bad. They damn sure ain't us, because I can't do that anymore.
Right.
But everything that we see, we are the ancestors.